What I'm about to show you is basically a cheat code for vocal compression.
They've done studies, 60% of the time it works every time.
But seriously, it's hard to mess this up. If you're working on a fairly dynamic vocal, stacking compressors is the best way to even out their performance without making their vocal sound over compressed. So without further ado, let's get into it. The track we're going to be taking an example from today is called Piece of Past, and it's by an artist called Neo Rose. All right, to start with, let's have a listen to the vocal in the mix, and I'll just try and push the level up so we can hear it enough.
Say, oh, sometimes I can say, oh, just let me break.
Okay, so you can hear it's getting pretty lost. It's pretty dynamic. At times it's audible, and then at other times it drops away into the mix. So we need to use some compression to level this out. Now when it comes to rocky stuff or anything where I want the vocal to be right up in my face, generally I'm going to reach for something like an 1176 style compressor. So I'm going to grab the UAD Rev A 1176. Now I'm going for the blue stripe compressor as it's a bit more saturated, a bit more aggressive. It adds a little bit more high mid grit to the vocal. So let's have a listen to what we can get out of this.
Sometimes I can say, break, say, oh, what's left behind.
All right, sitting around there is pretty good. We are crushing this vocal a fair bit, but it sounds good. We've got a fast release, which is letting the performance be evened out a lot quicker, whereas if we had a slow release and the compressor clamps down, it takes longer to come back up, and it'll just sound like the vocal gets turned down, and we won't get those softer words coming through clearer. So that's why we have the fast release. You heard I was playing around with the ratios. These actually can almost act like EQs, really, when you're playing with this, because the higher the ratio, the sound does get brighter. So if you're feeling like 4:1's not really helping your vocal cut through, you could try jumping up to 8:1, 12:1. I know there's a lot of people who swear by 12:1 on vocals. Generally, I just play around with it and find one that I like the sound of. I'm thinking 8:1 on this vocal sounds pretty good. Okay, now with the attack, we could go for a fast attack if we wanted to. Sometimes a fast attack is actually better at dealing with the sibilance in a vocal, because a slow attack lets all the S and T sounds through and they can become quite aggressive, where a fast attack can actually grab those straight away and we're not exaggerating those sibilances. So let's try that.
Say, oh, sometimes I can say, oh, just let me break.
I think I prefer the slow attack on this one. So if we need to, let's just chuck a bit of a de-esser before the compressor to help deal with that a little bit. So I'm just going to use the Slate digital one, the Iosis E2 de-esser. I've made a default setting for this, so when I open it up, it's already on what I want, but I've just got a shelf and about a 70 to 80% dry wet ratio, and then we can play around with the amount.
Oh, sometimes I can say, oh.
Okay, little something like that to start with. All right, let's grab our next compressor now. That's just going to smooth everything out. And our main goal of this one is to just do a couple of dBs of gain reduction. So we're going to go for another UAD, the LA2A. So stacking the 1176 and the LA2A, these are like the two most famous compressors that you can think of. You get such a smooth vocal sound. Now check this out. We're mainly going for 2 to 3 dBs of gain reduction constantly. We want this to just kind of be floating over the vocal and just reining it in. So let's dial that in.
Oh, just let me break. Say, oh, what's left behind, you can't find a way.
Okay, did you hear that when it was bypassed? Even though the level was pretty much the same, the vocal disappeared a bit more into the mix. Even though we've got a nice amount of compression going on, it's sitting up there, it lost something. Now the LA2A generally adds a little bit of warmth, a bit of thickness to the sound. That tiny bit of gain reduction is just evening out the vocal performance in such a smooth and pleasing way, and we're not losing anything, and it's helping the vocal to sit in the mix so much better. Let's hear it again, on and off.
Oh, sometimes I can
It's just magic. So stacking two compressors like that. So we've got 1176 and then we've got an optical compressor. That kind of combination is always a winner, especially in this kind of mix where you need the vocals to dominate over loud guitars and drums. You can't go too wrong. Now adding another stage of compression, we are making the S's and T's again poke out a bit more. So we might follow this up with a second round of de-essing. Now I do like to use the FabFilter Pro MB as a de-esser. Again, I have this already set up as my default because I use it so often for de-essing, but in their settings, vocals, de-esser, pretty much loads up that setting. Fastest attack, fastest release. About 6 dBs of gain reduction. We can play around this and we can play with the threshold. Let's play the track and dial this in a little bit.
Say oh, sometimes I can say oh, just let me.
Cool, that sounds great. Now we can bring in all our backing vocals with that.
Say oh, sometimes I can say oh.
Awesome, sounds sick. Now, one thing I forgot to add, we should probably chuck a EQ at the start and just put a bit of a high pass on to avoid any unwanted low frequency rumbles.
Say oh, sometimes I can say.
There you go, guys. That is a basically foolproof way of compressing vocals that are dynamic and just getting them to sit nice and smooth in the mix. As long as the vocals were recorded properly and there's nothing too weird going on, as long as they've stood in front of the microphone, they haven't jumped in and out, done too much crazy stuff, they've just delivered a good vocal performance, you won't have any trouble compressing vocals with this technique. Okay, now, so for my Logic Pro users who don't use external plugins, let's try and pull the same thing using stock plugins. Okay, to start with, let's duplicate over this EQ, high pass filter. Let's grab a compressor for our next step. Now I'm going to use the vintage FET, which is going to act like the 76A, a bit more aggressive. Okay, let's try and dial this in and see what we can get.
Say oh, sometimes I can say oh.
Let's chuck a de-esser before that. Man, it's been so long since I've used a de-esser in Logic. I don't even know where it is. Okay, let's try and dial this de-esser in.
Say oh, sometimes I can say oh.
All right, let's follow up our FET compressor with an optical compressor. So let's grab the stock compressor again and go vintage opto.
Say oh, sometimes I can say oh, just let me breathe.
Okay, let's do a quick comparison between the UAD and FabFilter plugins versus the Logic stock plugins and see how it stacks up.
Say oh, sometimes I can say oh, just let me breathe. Say oh, what's left behind you can't find a way.
It holds up pretty good. I noticed that the UAD plugins just have a little bit more sparkly, brighter top end to them, and that is something you could definitely add to your vocal. But either way, both of those are sitting in the mix way better now. They don't sound over compressed, and you can hear all the words and articulation and nuances in the performance, and that is exactly what we wanted when we set out with this technique. So there you go, guys. That's basically cheat code compression for vocals. You really can't go too wrong using that method. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Please drop a comment below. Let me know what you thought. If you already use this technique, or if you like to stack different compressors, let us know in the comments what you like to use. And I'll see you guys in the next video.
Say oh, sometimes